Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Durst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I work with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the United States. What sets them apart? A lot, but there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet, the people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The insight track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of the uncertainty of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Connie Dorigan, thank you for joining us on today's episode of People in Transition. I'm so excited about having you with us.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you.
Hey, Connie, when you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
You know, that's a really good question. And as a little person, I think that I realized that I wanted to work for myself. My dad taught me how to make money by setting up a Kool-Aid and popcorn stand. And I just probably never forgot about how exciting it was to know that no matter what, if push came to shove, if I was working for myself, I could always make money. Time went on, and I thought I'd be perhaps a teacher. At another point, I thought I would be a physical therapist. I ended up getting a master's in social work with the idea that, I would go to work for myself as a therapist. And along the lines, I ended up becoming a recruiter. So I don't know that there's a real linear path there, other than the fact that I did work for a very large recruiting company for about 10 years and then opened up my own business. So as a small child, I just always knew that that's where I would be eventually, and that's where I am.
Connie, how do you think you handled those transitions you went through? Do you think you did well on that? Do you think both technique-wise as well as emotionally? How would you rate your own transition management?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think there was trial and error, a lot of trial and error. I was inclined in college to do volunteer work. And I think that is the thing that really opened my eyes to what the possibilities were and what I really didn't want to do. I actually volunteered at a county hospital in a physical therapy ward and saw what physical therapists did in that environment. I volunteered at another environment, a residential facility, and observed and did physical therapy assistant work in that environment, and realized very quickly that was not the career for me. So trial and error. And I then did some other work in the school district and realized I didn't really want to work in a school district or in a classroom. I went to graduate school very decidedly. And so I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question other than to say that trial and error, knowing what I didn't want to do, creating a new path, and then luck. I lucked into recruiting and decided to take a risk. It was a very different trajectory than I ever even imagined possible. Knew that I made the decision that I would explore the opportunity for 3 months, and if I liked it after 3 months, that I would continue. And that was a very long time ago.
Connie, as a executive search person, I'm sure you get this question quite often. It goes something like this: I'm out of a job. Help me find my next career opportunity. Why don't you explain to our listeners what an executive search firm person does and how that a unemployed person should use them?
That's a really good question. That's a big question, and I do get that question a lot. Most people, when they call me, or how it happens often is that a friend will say, I know a recruiter. She helps people get jobs. Why don't you give her a call? And then I get that call. And I'm happy for the referral. I always am happy for the referral. The conversation goes down the path of, thank you very much for the call. What is it that you do? Did you know that recruiters specialize in certain areas? And my area happens to be the food processing industry, predominantly on the West Coast. Is that the area of work that you are interested in? Oh, no, I'm an IT person for a bank. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me see if I can help you find a recruiter that specializes in your area. So that is one thing, is helping those inquiries, those people wondering if I can help them find a job, to find a type of recruiter that specializes in their niche. And that oftentimes is not real obvious to somebody who is looking for a job. The second thing that we do in that kind of conversation is find out, let's say, for example, they are in my niche, what have they done to try and find a job for themselves? Do they have a resume? Do they have their LinkedIn profile updated? What ideas do they have for themselves? Do they know who's hiring in the industry, who the competitors are? So we kind of do a little bit of education initially with that kind of a person to help them understand that there's strategies to be developed when it comes to looking for a job, and recruiters are only part of the strategy.
Connie, I just read the other day this article about recruiting, and it talked about a hidden job market, and I was confused. What does a hidden job market mean to you?
Oh, you're full of very good questions. I like it. And as a matter of fact, I was just talking about the hidden job market to one of my coaching clients just earlier today. And the hidden job market is alive and well. And what that means is that more than 50% of the jobs that are available to be filled are not ever advertised. And there's multiple reasons for that. Oftentimes companies are running too quickly to get job postings on their website or out onto any of the job boards. Yet they know that there is a weak link in a department, that if somebody better came along, that person would be replaced. That's not an open job per se, but there is an opening if the right person came along. The other part of the hidden job market is that if a company is growing, they know strategically that if the right talent comes along, it is to their best interest to hire that talent when it's available and not wait for an official job to be posted on their website or to the job boards. So there's multiple reasons for companies to hire individuals for positions that are never advertised. And now I'm just touching on a couple of the highlights, but there's many more situations where people get hired and there's no job posting.
Connie, does it make any difference the time of year that you're doing your search? I always hear the old adage, you might as well not do anything during November and December because it's the holidays and no decisions are made. Do you see an ebb and flow in terms of activity?
My short answer is no, never. I will say that there are trends. There are absolute trends. I have noticed that quite often at the very beginning of the year, the first 2 weeks of January, my phones are quiet. And that's because people are getting back to work. They're kind of figuring out what they have to work with, where they're going forward, how they're going forward, identifying gaps if there are any gaps in talent, and figuring out what they're going to do about it. That usually only lasts a couple of weeks. And then my phones start ringing, and they ring all year long. The fallacy about, November, December being a lull is that a fallacy. If a company is looking to fill a position in November or December, that is a very urgent opening. And most companies will not stop interviewing. They will not stop receiving applications if there is an opening in November or December. They would prefer to get that position filled before January. So I would say quite the opposite. If there is a job opening that you are interested in, apply, no matter what time of year, including November, December.
Connie, my experience is that hiring managers oftentimes hire people they know or someone in their organization knows and makes a referral about that individual. How can you establish a kind of an advocate for yourself in the company that you might be interested in?
It all has to do with networking, and I think that networking oftentimes gets shoved under the rug when individuals are busy with their current job. It's an important component, I believe, to strategic career management, is to always make sure that networking is on your priority list. Attend professional meetings, belong to professional organizations, participate in them, be an entity in your market. It's part of a very strong career management strategy, and not something to be forgotten about when you're busy, involved in your job. It's just part of something that needs to be on your to-do list. Take a look at that every quarter. What am I doing with my networking? Am I lacking? What can I do very quickly to enhance who knows who I am and what I can do? So that's my number one recommendation, is always make networking a priority, because what you're saying is true. People do hire those that they know, or those that get recommended by someone that they know.
But Connie, what if you're just not an outgoing communicator? What if you're an introvert? What if you're just not comfortable with that networking? What do you do then?
Well, there's different styles of networking, and so there's different styles of networking. Let me back up and talk about introverts for just a second, because introverts, once they are on task, can do just about anything. So an introvert may not be the life of the party at the networking event. However, if an introvert goes to a networking event and they know that they need to connect with, say, 3 to 5 significant people during the event, they can make that decision. I need to connect with these 3 to 5 people, and they can go one-on-one, have conversations with them. There are strategies for that. So number one, introverts can network just as effectively, if not even more effectively, than their extrovert counterparts. So there's that piece. Then there's the other part of how introverts can effectively network, and that is through LinkedIn. It's a very effective networking tool, and it sort of takes the pressure off of the social interaction and allows for that individual to be connecting and seen through media posts, through outreach to people in their industry, connecting with them, asking for one-on-one connections, and then communicating with them over time.
What tips do you have to create an outstanding resume, a resume that stands out from the others?
Well, we could talk an hour about that. So let me see if I can be very brief about answering your question. I will say that on my website, I do have a free tool about resumes, so there's that. Beyond that, I will say that clear, concise, brief, easy to scan, easy to read, accomplishments-oriented, reverse chronological order is the order of the day.
And is it 4 pages? Is it half a page? What should I be shooting for? What's the recruiter going to want to see?
Somewhere between the half a page and 4 page. It depends. If you're newer to your career and to work in general, a one-page resume is fine. If you have, anywhere from 2 to 5 years of experience, let's just say a 2-page resume is fine. If you are a person that has 15 to 20 years of experience, as long as it meets that criteria of, scannable, easy to read, accomplishments oriented, I would read a 3-page resume. You get to 4 pages and a lot of densely written content, and my eyes cross, and I tend to want to just toss those resumes. So somewhere in there.
Cover letter or no cover letter?
Oh, that's a 50-50 deal. There's the camp that wants them, and there's the camp that doesn't. I tend to be the camp that doesn't. However, they are important. They are a very important part of your assets and job search assets, the resume, LinkedIn profile, cover letter. And what I have to say about cover letters is create one, modify it for each position that requests one, and only send a cover letter if they're requested.
What tips, Connie, do you have for someone preparing for an interview? And is it that preparation any different preparing for an telephone or Zoom interview versus an in-person interview?
Well, that's about 5 questions rolled in one. And, the whole interview prep thing is something that I spend probably 45 minutes to an hour on with each individual that I prep for an interview. So I would say it's a critical component to interview success. And so I can spend a little more time on that. And then about Zoom and telephone interviews, if you're prepared for an on-site interview, you have everything you need to be prepared for a telephone or Zoom interview. And I will go back to prepping for an in-person interview in just a second. The one thing I want to say about a telephone interview, the beauty of them is that you can have all kinds of documents out in front of you on your desk. You can have your resume, a job description, and your list of accomplishments right there in front of you, and you can refer to them as the conversation is flowing. And that's sometimes people forget about that, and they go, oh, I might be nervous, I can't see anybody, and it really doesn't matter because you can listen. And then you have the advantage of having all that information in front of you that you can refer to. A Zoom interview is a little trickier along those lines, but you still can have all that information out in front of you. The only thing about a Zoom interview is just make sure that your lighting is good, that the background is good, that your door is closed so that you have minimal interruptions or no interruptions. Practice your Zoom interview. Practice with someone that isn't intimidating to you so that you're comfortable. It takes time to become comfortable in front of a camera. So I would say practice that part specifically. The other thing about prepping for interview, it may be something that we circle back to because it's a long answer, quite frankly.
Go ahead. Let's do it now.
Okay. And again, I'm going to plug my website because I do have free tools about interview prep. I say there's 5 steps to interview prep. And the first step to an interview prep is to research the company that you are applying for. There's LinkedIn is a place, their website is a place. You can research, various reviews about the company. There's all kinds of tools, but researching the company is your first step. Researching your interview panel, and it may be just one individual that you're talking to initially, but I would encourage you to take a look at other people that might show up on the interview panel over time. And become familiar with their LinkedIn profiles, know where they went to school, how their career progressed, and maybe some commonalities in your background, hobbies, what have you. It's really important to not only understand who you're talking to professionally, but to get a feel for them as a person as well, so that you can ask questions specifically of them, about them, and how they got where they are, to show interest and show that you've done something beyond just surface information gathering about them as people. So the third step then is what I call skills mapping. And what I mean by that is understanding how you qualify for the position at hand. And what I mean by that is getting a copy of your resume in front of you, getting a copy of the job description in front of you, and getting a blank piece of paper onto the side of that. And taking a look at that job description line by line by line in terms of what the requirements of the position are, what the duties will be, what the expectations are, etc., and identify where, in fact, your skills, experiences, and responsibilities match the job at hand, the specific job at hand, and identifying any gaps that you may have in terms of what they are looking for, because you're going to want to deal with those gaps at some point. Once you've identified, where your skills and experiences match with the requirements of the job, if you would make some points on the blank piece of paper with examples of, say, for example, leadership, management are high on the list of requirement. Now, those are generic, but let's say they are on the list, and you have been a leader or a manager for the last 12 years. You can state that fact. I've been a manager for the last 12 years. I have managed teams of this size and comprised of these kinds of individuals. I'm a second level manager. I'm a first level manager. Whatever it is, but to have examples of each main requirement that you can then speak to when questions come up in the interview, and you already have examples, because quite often somebody will say to you in the interview, can you give me an example of? And if you have taken the time to do this kind of preparation, you will have all your examples, or the majority of them, written out in front of you. You won't have to pause. They will be front of mind, and you'll be able to very, very concisely and articulately answer their questions. So that's a real important part, and I call that skills mapping. The fourth step is to make your list of questions. An interview is a two-way street, and it's critically important to have your list of questions. Questions can fall into about the company, about the position, about where, problems that may exist in the department, issues that need to be dealt with immediately. What does success look like 6 months from now or a year from now? Whatever is important to you about knowing whether or not that position is something that you are qualified to do and want to do should show up in your list of questions. You can have as many as 20 questions. You may not get to answer them all, but through the course of the interview process, you probably will get most of them answered. And then, of course, there is the fifth step, which is practice. And many people want to skip that part. And yet it's just very critical that a person especially practice any questions that may come up that would trip them up. For example, I see a gap in your work history. What's that gap all about? Oh, don't get caught flat-footed there. Have that answer ready. I see that you job hopped here in this section of your career history. You were a year here, 18 months there, 14 months there, and then, talk to me about that. And especially if you got fired from a position, it's really important that you talk about what the issues were, what you learned about the situation, how you plan to go forward differently, and practice that answer so that you can be very, very clear and concise and unemotional about it when you are answering that question in person or in any other modality. So those are my 5 steps to interview.
Connie, do your website for our listeners, please.
It's my last name, Dorigan.com.
Great. Thank you.
Dorigan.com.
Thank you. So you kind of touched on this, but maybe you have some other thoughts. A lot of my friends right now, during these last 600 days that we have been dealing with COVID, have been laid off. What do you suggest telling a hiring manager about that you were laid off? How can that person manage that message best?
It's a really, really good question. And any layoff, whether it be COVID related or any other kind of situation that comes up, is important to be able to manage your answer to that carefully. If for COVID specifically, I would encourage the individual to talk about what circumstances led to the company needing to lay people off. If it was a situation where it was something in food service or in the hospitality industry, anywhere in the hospitality industry, that's pretty common occurrence that major layoffs have occurred, may continue to occur, and the companies just were unable to survive. The critical piece there is to just be able to talk about what the situation was for that specific company, that you do have references from that company, that you are eligible for hire back. That is very important. Hopefully you are. And your ability to just say that story to them very clearly and concisely would be my suggestion.
During the emotional battle that goes on in your head while you're in transition, Connie, any suggestions to help them keep their confidence up?
Yes, I do have a couple of suggestions. And one is to make a plan, really have a job search plan and work your plan. I think that's very, very important. And if you don't know what to do, ask for help. There are a lot of resources that are available to help guide that process. So I would say create a plan, work the plan, and find an accountability partner, if at all possible. Maybe somebody that is also unemployed and looking for a position, to keep yourself on track so that you keep your numbers up. And numbers, I mean that you are making enough outreach calls per day, that you are applying for X number of jobs per day. Make sure that you keep your activity moving forward no matter what. So it's not really answering the emotional component, but the solution to having an emotional reaction is to stay in action and to have an accountability partner and to seek out help if in fact you're feeling like you're not as presenting yourself in the most positive way when you actually do get into an interview. I would also say that limit your time that you spend with job search. You do need to make it a priority, but it doesn't need to be your only priority. I would incorporate making sure that you have fun every day, that you have physical activity every day, that you have social interaction every day, so that you have other parts of your life that are continuing to go well while you proceed down the path of looking for your job.
Connie, any other books or other resources that you'd recommend to someone who's going through their own personal transition?
Well, of course, my first suggestion would be to go to my website, which is Dorigan.com. And I have a number of free job search tools on my website that are very, very helpful to individuals that are going through transition or just looking to up their game while they are currently looking for a job. So that would be my number one suggestion. I think that would be a great place to start.
Kind of wrapping this up, if you want our listeners to remember three things as they go through transition and find that next great opportunity for themselves, what are the three things you want them to take away?
You know, the three things that I would have them do is make sure that you review your job search assets. That would be the number one thing. Review and revise your job search assets. So your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your cover letter template. Make a job search plan. That is step number two. It's really, really important to have a plan of how you're going to go about this transition. And number three would be to ask for help. It's really okay to ask for help. Yes, those would be my three.
Connie Dorigan, thank you so much for your thoughts, for your insights, for just being so available to share what your experiences have been. I know that this is going to be very useful for people that are going through job transition. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We're working in unprecedented times as the world responds to the recent COVID-19 crisis. The fact is that even those who are not in transition understand it could be right around the corner, next month or a year from now. The purpose of these episodes are to give listeners support and the critical tools to adjust with the winds, wherever they come. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully, perhaps gracefully or without too many battle scars, survived their own obstacle courses and can share useful information on how to steady your ship or your world in this uncertainty. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on social media. If you have any questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time you're investing in sharing these important conversations with me, my guests, and others who are going through life transition. Transitions between jobs, life stages, new entrepreneurial ventures, or whatever life brings. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode of People in Transition.